Hey everyone, I hope everybody is doing well. I am Steve. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. I'm going to talk to you about fear. Times like this that really can grip us like fear. So let me start with that question. How about you? Are you fearful in these times? All this staying at home and missing school and listening to the TV. Are you feeling fear? And you know there's nothing wrong with feeling fear. Just don't stay there. That's where we're going with this teaching. I don't know about you, but I hate fear. And I bet you do too. And you know, because of that, I would really think I would get better at dealing with it, but I don't. And so that's another reason why I want to talk about it. You see, when I get afraid, I just freeze and I just about won't listen to anything or anybody. I get so consumed with just staring at what I fear most. I would tell you that's one of the reasons Jesus came to earth, was to lead us out of that behavior, because that serves us so poorly. So Jesus was clear to teach us, and he did it over a dozen times. And he said, there is no need for you to fear ever. His words were, fear not, in Hebrew, of course, and there is never occasion we need to fear, and he only did these teachings at times that we would fear the most, to let us know, I know this is a fearful time, there is no reason for you to fear. I would tell you, unfear is not the way out of fear. We don't know how to unfear. But what is the way out of fear? Something we do know that Jesus taught, and that is trust. If we trust something, we can come out of fear, and trusting medicine, trusting doctors is a great way out of fear. Trusting this isolation, that's a good way to come out of this. The best way and the fundamental way that we need to do it is to trust God. Trust the things he says and go to God and follow that pathway out of any fear that we would have in our lives. So I want to tell you a story out of the book of Esther. It's a short little book. I want you to read it after the teaching today. It's a small book, 3,200 words. You can read it in 10 minutes time and read it to get the whole story, because I'm going to trip through this real quickly. But it tells the story of a young Jewish girl who has been orphaned. She has lost both of her parents. That's tough. On top of that, she's been exiled, which means she's been taken into a foreign country against her will, and she's a slave there as well as her people are slaves there. So this story starts very rough, but God's always involved in our lives and in these stories. And so along with her goes an older cousin named Mordecai, and Mordecai adopts her, and they have a very good relationship. He becomes her parent, and they've got each other to go through these difficult times. So starts out rough. Here's more of the story. The king of that land that she's been taken to and he's been taken to is a guy that has a strange name by Xerxes. He was the king. Xerxes was party prone. He was a heavy drinker. He was a prideful king, and one day out of the blue, he dumps the queen. Read Esther to find out why. Very intriguing. And then he sends out into the land for new queen candidates. Well, God's involved in our life. He made Esther to be who he wanted Esther to be, and one of the things he made her to be was beautiful, very beautiful. So she became one of the 400 virgin candidates that went to the king's city of Susa to be trained up to audition for queen. So her life got easier. That's pretty nice, going from slave girl to queen candidate, and so her life was much better. Even though it was probably meaningless, it was much better. Lo and behold, God had given her so much beauty and so much style that when she finally got before the king for her testing, he flipped over her, and before we know it in the story, she is Queen Esther, and then her life gets really, really good. And then those are the times in life when we go, oh, God's so cool, God's so faithful. Look at Esther. She went from a slave, orphan girl to the number one woman in that country. Now, bear in mind, Esther is probably 14 or 15 during this time. How many of you all are about that age? Imagine that. Imagine being who she is at 14 or 15. So the story goes on. Cousin dad Mordecai, moves to the town where she now is so he can be closer to his daughter. And in that process, the king's number one man was a guy named Haman. And did he ever have an ego? It was bigger than the temple. And he wanted everybody in that city to bow down to him. Well, Mordecai had too much love and respect for God to bow down to any man. And so Mordecai would wouldn't do it. And that really ticked off Haman. Ticked him off to the point that he tricked the king into issuing a decree. He told the king, there's these people that are just causing trouble. They're not helping you at all. Let's get rid of them on one given day, and the king will be stronger and we don't have to mess with it. King, being a heavy partier, said, fine with me. And so he signs that, and that goes out into the land. It is the law. On a given day, Mordecai and every other Jew in the country is going to die. This story's over with. There's nothing to do but cry, right? If that happened in our life, if we knew with this plague going through our land that, oh, next Thursday I die, we would probably just shiver in our boots, those of us that are wearing boots. That's not what Mordecai and that's not what Esther did, and that's why this story is so meaningful for their life. So you have to read the story because their response was perfect. That is, God is never over. God is never out of our life if we will involve him. And so watch what they do. The first thing Mordecai does on finding that his life is gonna be over is he tears his clothes, puts on some clothes to go cry in, throws ashes all over himself, and heads out into the city to cry out to God publicly. And so he takes the risk of being the most noticeable Jew. The day they go to kill Jews, they know where Mordecai is because he's out in the city lamenting to God, mourning to God, and God springs into action. And he, through Esther's aides, they come in and go, Esther, your cousin daddy is out there and he is having some trouble and he looks horrible. And so she sends some people out to go, hey, what's going on? And he said, hey, Esther, you don't know, but this has been signed. He sends her the paperwork and he says, you have to go to the king and beg for mercy for the Jews. Well, Esther was quick to send a messenger back and go, what are you talking about, cuz daddy? If I go to the king and the king has not asked for me, the king will kill me. That's the law. What are you saying to me? That arrives to Mordecai, and Mordecai immediately responds back to the queen, who is his daughter and he loves greatly. And he tells the queen, they might not know you're a Jew yet. Eventually they will know. And you need to know if you don't respond, God will have somebody else do this. He trusts God totally. That's to be noted for our lives. And so he said, maybe this is the reason God made you queen. Well, she takes that to heart and she springs back into action, and watch what she does because it's key for our lives. She says, okay, Mordecai, you get all of your friends and you pray and you mourn, and they call that fasting back in that time, still do, and you fast for 3 days. I'm going to get all of my attendants. I'm going to have them fast to God for 3 days. At the end of 3 days, I am going to the king. And he says something so fabulous. Girls, listen to this. Young boys, listen to this. Remember, she's still a teenager. She says, and if I die, I die. What faith in God. What courage for a young girl to be able to say, I'm going to pray to God, I'm going to get this in his hands, and I'm going to watch what God does. If my life ends there, it ends on me trusting God. Guess what happens? In the 3 days, she goes to the king. You have to read the story. It's a cool story. God has moved the king. The king says, come here. He listens to the story, understands Mordecai is going to get killed. He knows Mordecai has the king's back, and he does not want Mordecai killed. So he calls Mordecai in, says, rewrite the law. Mordecai rewrites the law where now the Jews are free. Now the Jews can defend themselves. And the king signs it into action, and everything changes all of a sudden, just like it can for our lives. If we will take any problem, a bad teacher, trouble with your parents, did something wrong with the car, girl or boy problem, anything we have, we want to have the courage to trust God and take that problem to God. So the fear is gone now because Esther trusted God and took action, and Mordecai trusted God and took action. So that's the moral of this teaching. What we need to do whenever we're afraid is to start trusting God more, to pray to him, to mourn to him. Matthew 5:3 and Matthew 5:4, when he says, happy are going to be those that are poor in spirit. They've got some bad news and now they're afraid. And then happy are those who mourn, which means mourn to God. In the face of this current crisis, live in and trust God. Don't don't trust your fear. Make sure you trust and that's active. Make sure that you pray to God. And then place your fear in and look for God to move and follow that movement of God. And you'll find out you don't fear. If you still have some fear left, go back to prayer, go back to do more trusting, and then take action. I'm through. I love you guys. Read the book of Esther. It's a small book, 3,200 words. Let's pray. God, what wonderful young people these are, and they are people of the age that you will use. You will use them to call out other children in their classes, other children in their family, other kids in the community. Father, strengthen their trust in you. Answer their prayers to you. Bless their lives. Bless their families through them. Let them know that life is here, that fear is real and not anything to be entertained. And when we have fear, to trust more. I pray this in Jesus' holy name. Amen. Thanks, guys. See you soon. Bye.